Keynote speaker 4, I have now the honor of introducing. General Peter Pace was commissioned in June 1967, following graduation from the United States Naval Academy. During his distinguished career, General Pace has held command at virtually every level, beginning as a rifle platoon leader in Vietnam. General Pace served as the 16th chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff from 2005 to 2007. Prior to becoming chairman, he served 4 years as vice chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff. General Pace holds the distinction of being the first Marine to have served in either of these positions. He retired on October 1st, 2007, after more than 40 years of active military service. He and his wife, Lynn, are associated with a number of charities focused on supporting troops and their families. Everyone, General Peter Pace.
Well, good morning. Good morning. Campbell, thank you very much for the introduction. It's great to be back here with you all. For me, to be back to my alma mater and to be able to talk to so many great emerging leaders from 120 some odd institutions around the planet. So I'm honored to have the opportunity to do this and a little bit intimidated to be able to find something that you haven't already heard from Mr. Bloomberg or from Secretary England, but I'll give it a shot. Most important to me is at the end we get some Q&A, and I know you won't be bashful, but I want you to know there's nothing out of bounds. You ask anything you want. If I know the answer, I'll give you a straight shot. If I don't, I'll make something up. By the time you're positive I made it up, I'll be gone. It'll be okay. You know, leadership principles, in my mind, are universal. But the application is very much personal. So when you look at leaders who you admire, by all means try to emulate the traits that you see in them that you want to have in yourself. But understand some things don't work for you. I'm the kind of guy who likes to touch people. If I could have stood in the doorway and had a chance to shake your hand on the way in, I would have done that, just to have a little personal touch with you all. I like it when somebody puts their arm around me and says, "Hey, Pete, you did a good job," and I like to do that to somebody else. But if you have ever had somebody put their arm around you who was trying to do the right thing but was uncomfortable putting their arm around you, it's like two magnets repelling. And the person trying to force that trait comes across as phony instead of the person they're trying to be. So by all means, as you go through life, pick up leadership traits from the leaders around you who you admire. Try them out. If they work for you, keep them in your kit bag. If they do not work for you, leave them alone. Because every good leader does not have to use every specific leadership technique, just the ones that work for you. The first thing I would say to you, I know you've already done this, but it's important to pick where you are going to work. Now, the folks here in uniform have already made that basic decision, but others in this room have not yet. When you've got Wikipedia and Google, there's absolutely no reason on the planet to not research where you're thinking about going, whether it's school or a company or whatever you're going to do. Look at that organization and look at the top of the organization. First of all, what do they do? Is the product they're producing or the service they're providing to the nation something of which you would be personally proud to be a part? And then look at the leadership. And are the leaders the kind of people who you want to become? Because whether it's a military organization or a corporate company, unless you parachute in at the top of the organization, you are not going to change the culture. The organization is going to change you. I had 40 plus years in the Marine Corps. Guess what? I think like a Marine. I act like one, I hope. You all, wherever you go in life, wherever you spend time, the longer you spend in whatever it is you're doing, the more you are going to become like the leaders in that company. And you should choose up front who you want to be like 10, 15, 20 years from now. Having said that, the next thing I would say to you is grow where you are planted. Having said to yourself, this is where I want to be. This is where I want to work. Have the humility to understand that the organization, whether it be a military organization or a corporate organization, often knows better than you do where you fit. You see yourself as a round peg in a round hole, and people around you see you differently. By all means, make sure people know what you want to do. That's important. But once they tell you what you're going to go do it like it was your own first choice. I can tell you, every single rank I ever had, somewhere in that time, I was disappointed in an assignment that I received, as a lieutenant, as a captain, as a major, you name it. I will give you one example, though, of why I believe so strongly in growing where you're planted. Because had I done everything that I wanted to do, I probably would have retired as a Marine colonel. That ain't bad. You make colonel in the Marine Corps, you've parred the course. But other people have saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and they put me in jobs that I would have never picked for myself. One example out of many. I'm a one-star. I'm the president of the Marine Corps University at Quantico, Virginia. I'm temporarily assigned to duty in Somalia as a deputy commander of U.S. Forces, Somalia. And I receive a phone call from the Commandant of the Marine Corps. And the Commandant says to me, Pete, I've got great news for you. You are on the 2-star list, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. And when you get back from Somalia, I'm going to give you 1st Marine Division. Now, 1st Marine Division is 16,000 plus Marines, Camp Pendleton, California, where it never rains. It is fabulous, okay? And as a Marine, I've died and gone to heaven. I'm still in Somalia 3 weeks later, and the Commandant calls me again. And he says, Pete, I know I told you that I was going to give you 1st Marine Division. He says, but I want to nominate you for your 3rd star, and I cannot do that yet because you don't have a joint tour as a general officer. You have one as a colonel, but you don't have one as a general officer. So instead of giving you the division, I'm going to send you to Japan. You're going to work as a deputy commander of U.S. Forces Japan. You're going to work for an Air Force 3-star, and then I'm going to nominate you for your 3rd star. Now, I'm on the phone, right? Life isn't all that bad because I'm wearing 1 star. This man's talking about 3, so things are going okay. But I'm really heartbroken that I'm not going to get to be the division commander. So I say to the Commandant of the Marine Corps, being a kid from New Jersey, always looking for an angle, I say, sir, if you're asking me, would I rather command a division and retire as a 2-star or go to Japan and work for some Air Force 3-star and maybe get 3 stars myself? I'd rather have the division. He said, I'm not asking you. So I did what you did. I laughed, and again, but I'm still making a deal, right? So I said, sir, okay, got you, sir, if I go to Japan and I come home and I don't get my 3rd star, will you give me the division then? And he says, yeah, but that ain't gonna happen. So I go to Japan, I work for this Air Force 3-star, we get along extremely well for 2 years. He keeps his 3 stars, comes back to the Pentagon to work on the Joint Staff. I get promoted to 3 stars. I go back to work on the Pentagon on the Joint Staff. We're now running mates together as 3 stars. He gets promoted to 4, goes off in command. I keep 3, I go off to command. I get 4. He is now the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a name you might recognize from the past, General Dick Myers. And General Myers is told in August of 2001 that he is going to be elevated from being Vice Chairman to Chairman, and they say to Dick Myers, who do you want to be your Vice Chairman? And he says, Pete Pace. Now, none of that would have happened if I hadn't gone to Japan instead of getting the division. I know that. Truth in advertising. You give me the same situation today, I'd still rather have the division, okay? But I understand what the Commandant did, and he was upfront about it. When you're a leader and you have to give subordinates missions that they prefer not to do, if you explain to them why, it makes all the difference in the world. Here's the #1 man in the Marine Corps, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, explaining to me why, in my mind, he was stabbing me in the heart and taking my division and sending me off to do something. I could give you example after example of when I was told to do things that I thought were not what I should be doing, and I went and did them anyway, because I should, and how it turned out to be just the right thing, just the right experience to eventually put me in a position to become vice chairman and then chairman. Make sure people know what you want, and then do what they ask you to do. Next, you're going to be in positions of leadership. That means you're going to be responsible for making decisions. Make the decisions. Don't wait around like a little bird waiting for mama bird to come put a worm in your mouth. I learned this early on in my tour as a Marine. I'm a second lieutenant. I get assigned after basic school at Quantico. I go to Vietnam. I join the 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines in Hue City during the Tet Offensive of 1968. I was lucky I got there after most of the tough battle was finished. But I joined them in that battle. Soon after the battle was over, my company was given the mission to do a patrol outside the city to see if there were any NVA left. My platoon was given the point to lead in the column. And because it was high elephant grass, we were in single file. Excuse me. As we were going along, I came to a decision point, and I called back to my company commander. Now, I'm a 22-year-old second lieutenant. He's a 25-year-old captain. And I called back to him to get guidance on what to do. And he answered my question. A little while later in the patrol, I called back a second time for guidance, and he gave it to me. A little while later, I called him a third time, and this time, if you take out the curse words, he said nothing. But I got it, which was, for God's sake, Lieutenant, make the decisions. I got mad. First, I got mad at him, and then I realized, no, I should be mad at myself. So I gave the radio back to Corporal Irwin, my radio operator, and I said, if he calls, tell him I'm not here, because I'm going to start making decisions. And I promised myself, if I ever got my butt chewed again, which I did, it was going to be for making decisions, not for waiting for somebody to tell me what to do. Make decisions. If you know it's your decision to make it. If you know it's your boss's decision to make, get it to him or her as fast as you can, because you're stealing leadership time from them the longer they don't know about the thing that they have to make a decision about. Clear. What about when you're not sure if it's your decision or your boss's? Here's what I recommend you do. Think through what you would do. Then go to your boss and say, hey, boss, I'm not sure if this is your decision or mine. If it's your decision, if it's my decision, this is what I'm going to do. If it's your decision, that's what I recommend you do. Man, if you're working for me, I love you. You've paid respect to my position. You haven't come to me with a problem. You've come to me with a thing that needs fixed, and you've come with a possible solution. You've given me options. Hey, Pete, go do it. Or, thank you, I'll make that decision, and I'll do what you recommended. Or, I'm going to extrapolate from what you said to this thing over here for these reasons. But you've given me something to work with. Now, you know it's your decision. There's no doubt in your mind, but you're not sure what decision to make. If you're in the military and you're operating in the field, you're making tactical decisions. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about whether you're in corporate life or you're in service life, and you have a personnel issue. It's a leadership issue. And you've got, I'll use PFC PACE, is a problem. And you know you got to do something, but you're not quite sure what to do, even though you know it's your decision. That happens more often than you would think to people, no matter what rank they happen to be or where they are in the organization. You know it's your responsibility, but you go, ugh. A way to handle that is to put yourself in other positions. If you were PFC PACE, what would you expect you to do? If you were one of his fellow PFCs, what would you expect you to do? If you were one of your peers, what would you expect you to do? If you were your boss, what would you expect you to do? Look at it from all those various angles, and then don't do anything anybody expects you to do. Do the thing with which you are personally most comfortable. You've looked at it from that level, you looked at it from this level, you looked at it from that level, and you've got these ideas in your head, and now it's time to decide. Pick the path with which you are personally comfortable. You'll be right 90% of the time. And if you're working for me, the 10% that you get wrong, I'm happy to help you police up. God, if you're a young executive, if you're a young officer, and you're not making mistakes, you're not working, you're not trying, you're not experimenting. I need you to be making mistakes. I need you to be learning. The only thing I ask of you is don't make the same mistake twice. If you're making mistakes because you're lazy, but if you're making mistakes that you've thought through and you're thinking that this is the right thing to do, and you go do it, and whoops, you stub your toe, that's experience. Just don't make that same mistake twice. I got my master's degree back in 1971, 1972. Have no idea. Don't remember most of that at all. Okay. I remember one thing from the day I heard it until today, and I'll remember it till I die. This is the early 1970s, so we're reading about things that happened in the mid-1960s, and there was a mid-level executive in the company that made a decision that cost that company $10 million. So fast forward to today, add a zero. They made a $100 million mistake. But in 1960s dollars, a $10 million mistake. And all the leaders between that person and the CEO said, fire this guy, fire this guy, fire this guy. And the CEO said something which is burned in my memory, which was, why would I fire somebody I just spent $10 million to educate? Yeah. So when you're making mistakes, you're thinking, I like that philosophy. But think about that. If somebody's working for you and they're trying, or if you're working and you make a mistake, was it an honest mistake? And if it was, for God's sake, hug them and get on about doing the right thing next. Okay? Don't be afraid to make decisions. Excuse me. Next. It won't surprise you that I admire courage. And yes, I absolutely admire courage on the battlefield. But I'm talking about the kind of courage it takes in a well-lit conference room where the boss is at the head, maybe giving a briefing on something, and all the other people in the room's heads are going up and down like this, and somebody in that room has the temerity to say, I see it a little bit differently, and here's why. The young executive, the young officer who has the temerity to say, I see it a little bit differently, is worth their weight in gold. The more senior you become, the more responsibility you have, and the further from the ground truth you are. As a general officer, if I want to know how brilliant I am, I can convince myself of that in the mirror every morning when I'm shaving. God, Pete, you are smart. Yeah, I am. Thanks very much. What I need is my junior officers, my junior executives to tell me my baby is ugly if my baby is ugly. Now, how do you do that? I'm not trying to stand up in front of a beer truck to get run over, okay? How do you do that as a junior person in any organization? I would recommend what I have done my entire life, to include when I was chairman, talking to the President of the United States. I ask questions. The phrase is, tell truth to power. Okay, that only works if power listens. If I say to my boss, hey boss, I disagree, if he happens to be a guy, I set up a small testosterone problem here, that he has to win 9 times out of 7 because he's the boss, and I've challenged him. But if I say something like, hey sir, if you hadn't said that, I was thinking this, can you educate me? You haven't challenged him. You have your idea on the table. If you're right, he can say, hey, Pete, you're right. If you're wrong, he can give you the education. But either way, if I'm the boss and you're asking those kinds of questions, I know that I have somebody I can trust to question me. Think about the times in your life already where you've been responsible for doing something, and you're telling people what you're about to go do, and nobody asks a question, or nobody makes a recommendation, compare that to your briefing, and your folks working with you are asking you questions and getting more definition and giving your ideas, and then you make a little better decision. Where is your comfort level? Your comfort level is in the discussion that allows you to make a better decision. That's how the people you are working for, they need that as well. Don't be afraid to speak up, to tell truth to power, but in a way that they can understand and accept. Now, quite honestly, as I become more senior, sometimes in my heart of hearts, I was asking the question with kind of tongue-in-cheek. Of course, once I get this on a table, they're going to see how brilliant I am. I got the education I asked for just enough times as chairman of the Joint Chiefs to be very thankful I hadn't put it on the table as Develop your own way, but promise yourself, you will never leave a meeting or anything where your stomach is starting to feel, something's not right, that you will never leave that without saying something. Your boss deserves it, and most importantly, the folks working for you deserve it. And the senior person, if you happen to be the senior person, has the absolute responsibility to set that tone. President Bush set that tone when I was vice chairman. I became vice chairman 1 October 2001. General Dick Myers was on travel. I was the acting chairman. I go to my first National Security Council meeting, which you know has got the president, the vice president, the secretary of state, the secretary of defense, the chairman of Joint Chiefs, and a lot of other cabinet officials. I'm sitting there at the desk next to the secretary of defense and about 2 seats from the president, and the discussion's going on. It has nothing to do with the U.S. military. But I promised myself if I were ever in a position like that I was not going to leave if something didn't seem right. So being a new guy on the block and not wanting to be offensive, I said, Mr. President, this is a little bit out of my lane, and that's as far as I got. He said, Pete, as long as you're in this room, nothing is out of your lane. Sir? I said what I said. 2 days later, still acting chairman. I'm a Marine, so I'm a slow learner. I'm back at the White House. And again, there's a discussion going on, and I'm thinking to myself, Joe's six-pack down at the 7-Eleven isn't going to get this. I don't get this. So again, trying to be, not offensive, I say, Mr. President, this is a little bit out of my lane, and that's as far as I got the second time. And he says, Pete, didn't I tell you 2 days ago that as long as you're in this room, nothing is out of your lane? I said, Mr. President, you did, and you will not have to tell me that again. What did the president do? What did the senior person in the room do? They said that although there were all these other experts in the room, the secretaries of this and the secretaries of that, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, he expected all of us to have our brains engaged to help him wrestle this problem. And he told me, without having to say it, that although I was wearing a uniform, that he expected all the guys and gals wearing suits and dresses in that room to be asking me questions until they were satisfied that they understood what was going on. Very empowering. So when you are junior, speak up. And when you are senior, make sure the juniors in the room know that you not only need them to speak up, you demand that they speak up. And when they do speak up, you thank them for speaking up. That's what courage is about. I've seen officers in the Marine Corps who clearly earned the medals of valor on their chest fold like cheap suitcases in a well-lit conference room because they were afraid that somebody might think their opinion to be wrong. The only wrong opinion is the one that doesn't get stated. I am perfectly comfortable being told I'm wrong after I speak my mind. In corporate life today, when I sit on corporate boards, I give my opinions, and I am perfectly happy to get overridden. If it's the President of the United States, I'm seeing the military piece. He's got the whole nation. So if I give him my best military advice and he goes on a different tack, I'm actually kind of happy he did. Next, I'll call it set your moral compass. You call it whatever you want. But if you haven't already decided who you are as a person, take some personal time to think about it. When I went to Quantico, Virginia as a second lieutenant, getting ready to go to Vietnam, we had a leadership class, and they talked about what do you do about troops who commit atrocities in combat. Weren't happening very often, but some were happening. And I remember thinking to myself, God, I'm never going to do anything like that myself, and I'm sure as heck not going to let anybody in my command ever do anything illegal or immoral in combat. Not going to happen. 30 July 1968. We're on patrol outside Da Nang, my platoon. We're crossing rice paddies, and from a small village, a sniper shoots, hits my machine gun squad leader, a great Lance Corporal named Guido Farinero. Born in Italy, came to the United States when he was a young kid, went to Chaminade High School out on Long Island, graduated there. Most of his fellow classmates went on to college. He wanted to serve his adopted country before he went on to college. He goes, joins the Marine Corps, 30 July 1968, shot and killed in Vietnam. I got to Guido just before he died. I was infuriated. I called in an artillery strike on the village. Now, fortunately, it takes a while for the guns to figure out where you are, where the enemy is, what they have to do with the guns themselves to put the rounds on target where you want them. And during the time that I was waiting for the rounds to be delivered, my platoon sergeant, who was my senior enlisted man in my unit, who was on his second tour, but he's like 20, 21 years old, I'm 22, didn't say anything to me, but he looked at me. And I knew the way he was looking at me, I was doing the wrong thing. So I did what I should have done, which was I called off the artillery strike, and we swept through the village on foot. And go figure, all we found were women and children. The sniper was long, long gone. I don't know how I could stand in front of you today if I had done what I almost did. It stunned me that I had almost done that. I got my platoon together as soon as the patrol was over, and I apologized to them. And I promised them as best I could I would never let that happen again. And every single day, to include this morning, since 30 July 1968, I have gotten up, and when I'm shaving, I'm thinking about what might challenge me morally today. 99.99999% of the time, nothing challenged me morally today. And on the rare occasions when it has happened, it wasn't anything I was thinking about. It's not all about life and death. What I have learned in my career and now in corporate life is that the moral challenges come when you are least prepared emotionally to deal with them. People don't come into work in business and say, I think I'll do something immoral today. No. What happens is they come to work, it's a normal day, somebody rolls a sweat grenade in the room, it goes off, and now all of a sudden everybody's moving. Something happened. A customer isn't satisfied. A competitor did something. The enemy has done something. Something happens where all of a sudden you have to react, and you have to react quickly, and your adrenaline is flowing. That's when it is dangerous. Because in the quest to quickly solve the problem, you start unknowingly cutting corners. That's where having a moral compass is so valuable. First, by telling people you plan on leading as best you can in a moral way, you want them to execute their missions in a moral way, and you ask them if they see you doing something that even looks slightly off track to say something to you. Okay? Rarely will it happen to you, but you should set your moral compass now and understand what your personal left and right limits are, so to speak, on what you allow yourself to do. And doing that is kind of like pick a class 101. You don't remember what you learned in a class 2 years ago. What you're learning is, maybe you do, but for the most part you don't. When you go through universities and colleges, what you're doing is you're training yourself how to think. You're thinking like an engineer, you're thinking like a mathematician, you're thinking like whatever you're thinking like. That's what you're learning in school. And that's what setting a moral compass is. It's not that you're going to be able to pick exactly what's going to happen, but that you have trained yourself. Just like now you will, without thinking about it, react differently than you would have before you came to your institution of higher learning. You're different. That's what setting a moral compass will do. So that when the challenge does come, when you're told to do something, part of your natural thought process is, if I do this, can I live with myself in the morning? It takes about 3 nanoseconds for you to know the difference between yes, I should and no, I shouldn't. Okay? And if you are in that rare case where your boss is telling you to do something immoral, again, if you go say, that's immoral, we can't do that, now you put me on a defensive. Again, this might just be my way of doing business, but my recommendation to you is, by all means, say something, but you might say, like, we can do that, but I think the outcome is going to be this. Is that what you really meant? And let them come to the conclusion, oops, they just crossed the line. But make sure, A, your head is on straight every day, and B, on the rare occasion when you are challenged morally, you stand up and say something. Last 2 things, and we go to Q&A. 1, somebody once said to me, Pete, if you have integrity, nothing else matters. And if you don't have integrity, nothing else matters. Excuse me. And if you think about it, that's all anybody needs to know about integrity. And it is absolutely true. If you have it, nothing else matters. And if you don't, nothing else matters. Lastly, and I suspect you've heard this a couple of times already in these last couple of days, but if you hear me say nothing else today, please hear me say this. When you are a leader, take care of the people in your charge. It's a privilege, and it's a sacred obligation. You want your boss to care about you. Your subordinates have the same feeling about you. When you're a junior executive, a junior officer, how do you go about becoming a caring leader? Well, first of all, when you take over your unit, you can certainly stand in front of them and say, I plan on leading you as best I can in a way that shows you I care about you as individuals. You can certainly say that, and you should if you feel that in your heart. But understand, they're going to be from Missouri. It's going to be show me time. And that's fair. How do you do that? You know, after about 10 years in the Marine Corps for me, by the 10-year mark, when you go from duty station to duty station, there are people there who have already served with you. Your reputation precedes you. But when you're coming out of college, out of the academies, and you're going to your first unit or your first company, nobody knows who you are, especially the people who you are the leader for. A couple of techniques that I think can work for you. 1, take 5 minutes each day and talk to one of your subordinates about themselves, not about the work, not about the mission, not about anything other than who are they, where they come from, what are their aspirations in life, and just talk to them like the human beings they are. Sometimes they'll tell you some of their problems. Truthfully, most of the time, you can't do anything about personal problems, but you can listen. Every once in a while, you can actually do something about their problem. That makes you feel pretty darn good. But whether or not you can actually help them with their problems, just talking to them is important. Then, without fanfare, you stand up for your people. If somebody raised being promoted, you should be working to get that person promoted. If they deserve a raise, you should be working to get that person a raise. And you don't have to go back to your cubicle or back to your office or back to your platoon area and say, I just stood up for you guys. No. They'll know before you get back. You just do what you should do as a leader, taking care of your people the way you want your boss to take care of you. And over time, this doesn't happen overnight. 6 months, a year, 2 years, 4 years, 7 years of being a leader who's trying to care. You don't have to get it right all the time. You will not get it right all the time. But if your troops, your people, your subordinates know that you care about them, an amazing thing happens. In a unit that has a leader who cares about them and they know it, The leader says, this is what I want done, this is the outcome I need. He's going to give them a mission with an intended end state, right? And in any organization, whether it's a military organization or a corporate organization, as soon as the subordinates start to execute what they were told to do by the boss, friction gets in the way, and things start going haywire. In an organization that has caring leadership, the subordinates will take personal and professional risk. They will understand the intent that the boss gave them, and they will, without going back to the boss, they will change the orders on the fly, and they will do what they need to do to get to the intent. What do they do if they believe the boss is all about his or her next promotion? They're going to do exactly what the boss told them to do. And because none of us, as a leader, is smart enough to see all the stuff that's going to happen, that mission, whatever it is going to fail. And they're going to giggle while you get carted off and a new boss comes in, and they're protected because guess what? They did exactly what you told them to do. The reason to take care of your people is because that's what good leaders do. The result of taking care of your people is that your organization will execute at a level higher than any of us has any right to believe we can lead other human beings to accomplish. It's amazing. I cannot take credit for a lot of things. I will take credit for trying to be a caring leader. Not always getting it right. But I know for a fact that my guys and gals always made me look much, much better than I ever was, because they took my orders, understood the intent, and changed it as needed to get the job done. Okay, stop talking at you. The microphones are here. Sometimes, although I know you guys aren't shrinking violence, sometimes it's hard to answer the first question. So let's skip the first question and go straight to the second question.
Hello, my name's Josiah. I'm from College of the Ozarks. And my question, you both discussed having aspirations and goals, but then at the beginning you also, addressed being content with where you're at and, growing where you're planted. So I was curious how you would, what's your suggestion to how we stay content with where we're at, but at the same time maintain those aspirations, hopes, and goals for our lives?
I think I understand the question. If I get this wrong, come back at me, okay? Because I want to make sure I answer your question. First of all, I believe there's a God, okay? My experience in Vietnam, I know there were at least 3 times I should have been killed. So I came out of Vietnam not understanding how I could go into Hue City with a company that had 158 Marines in it. 155 were killed and wounded. I was a rifle platoon leader. The 2 guys ahead of me were killed. I got through the battle, the rest of the battle, and I got through 13 months without a scratch. And I know at least 3 times I should have been killed, okay? So I come back from Vietnam believing, not knowing, but believing that there was something I was supposed to do in my life. And I said my prayers, and the answer I thought I got was, stay on active duty. So all the things I say to you now about, grow where you're planted, I wasn't smart enough to know that when I was growing up. I can see that now looking back. What I knew when I was growing up was that when I got these disappointments, I believed that I was on the path the good Lord had laid out for me, even though I didn't know where I was going, okay? And I was able then and I allowed myself to complain to myself and my wife about the job I was about to go to, but then shut up and go color, okay? And that's where the belief in being on the right path is really important, okay? I don't know how you go about life if you're an atheist, not my problem, but I don't know how you would do that. But I do believe there's a God, and I believe there's a reason for what we do. And if we will embrace the opportunities, it'll give us experiences that we might not otherwise have had. Importantly, especially if you're in the military, if you go to a service choice that you didn't pick for yourself, you go to an occupational specialty that you'd rather not have, guess what? There are great American young men and women who are willing to die for the country under your leadership. And they deserve to have the best leader they can have. And the Marine Corps has said, you are going to be their leader. That kind of thought process of I'm on a path. I'm not sure where it's going, but I know I'm on the right path. I've told people what I want to do. They told me I'm going to go do this. I'm going to do this the best I can. And oh, by the way, the people I'm working with deserve to have the leader that I'd like to have for myself. They're good human beings. They may or may not be happy to be there either. But I'm their leader, and I owe it to them to give them a best shot. Okay? And if you do that, I truly believe that whatever you're doing is a much lighter load when you're doing it. And that you'll be stunned and happily surprised, I bet, to find out what's going on. Now, by the way, if you're at the hard work, you understand already. Did that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You bet. Ma'am.
Good morning, sir. My name is Midshipman First Class Shine Nelson from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University.
Yeah.
My question for you is, you've spoken a lot about making decisions and setting your moral compass. What's the hardest moral dilemma you've had to face, and how did you come to your conclusion?
I'm going to give you an answer. You got to give me about 5 minutes, because I promised myself next time I answered this thing in public, I was going to do it right. The hardest decision I had to make morally, hardest recommendation I had to make morally, had to do with gays in the military. I was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I go to a Chicago Tribune editorial board, 60-minute editorial board. At the 59th minute, a reporter says to me, "What do you think about changing Don't Ask, Don't Tell to allow gays to serve in the military?" I'm a big boy. I know better than to give a one-sentence answer. I gave a one-sentence answer, which was I said something like, I believe that homosexual activity is immoral. And I left it on the table like that. No explanation, no nothing. By the time I got back to D.C., the stuff had already hit the fan. Okay? And people who thought I was right were yelling and screaming as much as people who thought I was wrong. And I wasn't comfortable with either camp. It's much like today. Nobody's listening, everybody's yelling. So, why did I say that? And what should I have said? First of all, are there gays in the military? Of course there are. Have they always been in the military? Yes. Have they served honorably? You bet. With valor? Yes. Okay, what's your problem, General? My problem was that my church teaches that sex outside the bonds of marriage of a man and a woman is a sin. I believe that. Has nothing to do with homosexuality, heterosexuality, in my mind, has everything to do with bonds of marriage of a man and a woman. I am not naive, nor am I pretending to be as white as the driven snow. What I'm saying is that when I was the chairman, in my mind, there was a difference between understanding human frailties, understanding that men and women, women and women, men and men do what they do behind closed doors. I'm not making any judgments about that at all. But I was being asked a question about, should the policy of the United States, in my mind, based on my moral upbringing, be that that is okay? And for me, in a very short, poorly worded sentence, I said, no, it's not. And in doing it that way, I hurt people in the armed forces. I was their chairman, and they were gay or lesbian, and I hurt them, and I didn't mean to, and I cannot take that back. I am proud of the ground I stood on because I truly believe what I believe based on my faith. But I'm not trying to impose that on anybody else, and I am not proud of the way I stood on the ground, because I stood on it poorly in the way I did what I did. Okay? So my most difficult moral obligation or challenge, I kicked into the stands when I was chairman. Okay? Did that answer your question?
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, sir. My name is Alexandria Agee, and I'm a student from Loyola University, Maryland. I had a question regarding what techniques did you really have to develop and hone in on to make those concise decisions, or develop that concise decision making during times of emotional distress or moral challenges?
Yeah.
So just the one you just mentioned.
First of all, at least in the military, you go to many, many schools. Okay, so as a Marine, I went to school as a lieutenant, captain, major, lieutenant colonel, colonel, 1-star, 2-star, and 3-star. Some were a year long, some were 6 months, some were a week. But every time I got promoted, I got to go to school. And in those schools, they always went back through some way of structured decision making. And then when you get to be a lieutenant colonel, you have your own staff. Your staff is helping you with structured decision. So again, it's not that all of a sudden one day you go to strategy 101 and now you understand exactly how to approach all problems. No. If you're an engineer major, you start thinking about problems this way. If you're a math major, you start thinking about problems this way. If you're a history major, you think about problems that way. And all your experiences tell you how you best digest data and how you best execute, okay? What happens, though, in a crisis is recognizing that you are way out over your skis and that as best you can, you need to slow this train down. Now, if it's tactical in nature, if you're getting shot at, you got to do something. But life isn't like that. Life is more, the crisis comes, and you've got to slow yourself down. And my belief was, as chairman of the Joint Chiefs, if I'm going to a meeting at the White House and people's pants are on fire, what the heck on the planet can get the most powerful nation on the planet to have their pants on fire? Nothing. We got time. And your responsibility, what is it that has you so consumed that your stomach is in a knot and your adrenaline's pumping? What is it about that? My mom told me a long time ago, God would never give me a challenge that I couldn't handle. I held on to that a couple of times in my life, okay? Because truthfully, as a leader, if you don't think sometimes that you're not adequate, if you think you are a good leader, you're not. If you think you're up to every challenge, you're not. I think a good leader recognizes the fact that they are human beings and they are frailties, and you do the best you can. Okay? So when you're challenged, like you're talking about, you take a deep breath, you bring people around you, and it's fine to tell your subordinates, I don't know what we should do right now. I need some ideas. That'll actually bring your subordinates closer to you when you admit that you don't have an answer to every problem. It also, when the boss says, not that I don't mean to be using myself as an example, when you kick something in the street, you kick it in the street. You tell people you kicked it in the street, and if you don't know something, you tell them you don't know something. One, it helps them help you, and two, it allows your subordinates to admit to you when they've made a mistake. If you come across as Miss Perfect all the time, your subordinates aren't going to be able to come to you and say, hey, I didn't do this right, because they think you always do it right, and you won't understand. If they see you as a human being and crises hit, they're going to rally around and do it, okay? So I can't give you a formula, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. I can simply tell you, trust the people around you, trust your own judgment, make the decisions when you have to make them, not sooner than you have to, when you have to make them so you get as much data as possible, but make the decision when you have to make it. And then learn from your mistakes. I tell you, I've been making mistakes all my life, and I'm not making light of it, but I hope I've learned along the way from some of the mistakes I've made. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You bet. Sir.
General Pace, thank you for coming to the conference and sharing your insights. I'm Robert Pickering from Laurel, Mississippi, and I really appreciated your comments and remarks about group polarization and groupthink and your seeming disdain for yes men. Could you go and elaborate more on how you as a leader and as the boss prevent groupthink and group polarization from occurring? Or is it just as simple as demanding questions and thinking questions? You do anything else?
A couple of things, and I'll give you a better answer tomorrow after I had a chance to think about it, but I'm on the spot right now. A technique is, first of all, most decisions don't have to be made today. So if you have a group come in and you're talking and nobody sees anything wrong with that, your alarm bell should be going off. I didn't have to do it very often because guess what? People normally found something wrong and we were able to figure it out. But on the rare occasion when I did, a technique I did use a couple times in my life was to say, okay, we all think this is a brilliant idea. Let's go home and let's reconvene tomorrow. And I'd like everybody to just think about, where's the ugly in here? Or something like that. And then have them come back in. You'd be surprised then when you say to people, okay, this sounds great. We're all in agreement. Let's think about this overnight. When they come back in the next morning, often they will find some holes to shoot, especially if they know the boss is looking for holes. They may even develop, they may manufacture holes for all I know, but they'll be thinking about it, okay? So that's one way to do it. Another way is by example. Really important for your subordinates who are observing you with your boss, and how you interact with your boss tells them how you expect them to interact with you, even without you saying a word. Really, really important. And when they do criticize, when they do bring up counter-arguments, you got to thank them. And the more senior you are, and the more junior the person is who says something, you really got to go out of your way and say, hey, that took courage to say that. Thank you. Okay? And you can even make light of it. That took courage to say that. You're fired. And go, no, I'm just kidding, okay? but whatever technique you use to be a human being about it, but to make sure the person knows that, no kidding, thank you. Thank you because you're right, or thank you, I don't agree with you for these reasons, but I appreciate you bringing it up. And any time you have a question, I need you to do what you just did. Okay? Remember what I said about President Bush? Everybody in the room, speak up. That's what you need. If you find yourself as a leader never getting questions, man, you got to take a good hard look in the mirror and figure out what it is that you're not doing that's making people clam up around you. Okay? And the first time you dump on somebody for asking a question, or you tell them how stupid something or other, everybody shuts up forever. Okay? That answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You bet. Thanks. Good luck. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, General Pace. My name's Caroline Fuhr, and I'm from the University of Pennsylvania. Briefly going off of that topic about speaking up when you're the lowest ranking person in the room and bringing forth your opinion and your perspective to the table. Have you ever dealt with a situation in which that opinion or perspective was not taken into account or blown off to the side? And if so, how do you deal with that and have the courage to go back again and continue to stay on your moral ground that you believe in?
Yeah. So yes, okay. First of all, you've done the right thing. You've spoken up. Your boss has a broader responsibility than you do, and he or she is either ignoring you or is taking and decided I'm not going to do that. But it's not going the way you want it to be going, right? A couple of things in that. Fundamentally, as a person, if you are making recommendations, if you are making decisions, and more often than not, your bosses are ignoring you, or your organization is telling you that your decisions are wrong, and you've gone through the process I've talked about, and you've made a decision based on what's in your heart, and this is the thing that you can live with, and what you can live with is totally different than what the organization is doing and believing, you are in the wrong organization, and it is time to go home, to quit. Now, if you're in the service, you can't quit till your time's up. If you're in a company, you can start looking for a new job right away. But it doesn't happen very often. But if you find that your heart of hearts is A, and the company is a strong B, and it's always that way, go find other employment. You'll be happier, they'll be happier, everybody will get along, okay? Also, stay in your lane. I'll use the military as an example, okay, but you can extrapolate. If I am a lieutenant The Commandant of the Marine Corps is fighting battles in D.C. for billions of dollars and thousands of troops. Okay, I know that. What can I do about that? Nothing. Any iota, any speck of energy that I waste thinking about the Commandant's problem is wasted time. My lane, my bandwidth is who I am, 2 levels down and 2 levels up. Okay? So if I'm a lieutenant and I got a platoon, I know what my what my squad leaders are doing, and I know what my fire team leaders are doing. I know what my company commander wants, and I know what my battalion commander wants. And I operate in there. I'm not oblivious to the fact the Commandant's fighting his battles, but I can't do anything about that. If I will do that, if I will be the best at my 40 guys, training them at the best I can, carrying leadership down, understanding my boss and my boss's boss's intent, and doing the best I can, I'm going to be a captain. And now, as a company commander, I understand what my platoon leaders are doing and what my squad leaders are doing, and I understand what my battalion commander is telling me to do and what my regimental or new commander wants. Okay? And if I will stay inside those 5 lanes, me in the middle, 2 up and 2 down, and do the best I can with what my responsibilities are right now, my 150 people becomes 800, becomes 3,000. And all of a sudden you're wearing stars, and now you're in a position where you can start helping the Commandant with his problems, okay? On the other end of the spectrum, you got General Neller, who's the Commandant of the Marine Corps. He's writing blank checks in Washington, D.C., not real checks. He's saying, my Marines can do that. And everybody on the planet believes that General Neller, when he says his Marines can do something, his Marines will do that. Why? Because General Neller, who's in Washington, D.C., and hasn't seen your boots in a long time, is relying on you as lieutenant to do your job because he knows, sitting in D.C., that his lieutenants are focused on their bandwidth, doing their jobs, and that's why the Marine Corps is going to be successful. It's the same in corporate life. You understand what problems the company's dealing with, but you focus on that piece that belongs to you, and you make your piece the best it can be, and that's how you contribute. And eventually, you might become the CEO. But if you don't, so what? You've got the best whatever in that company. Okay?
Thank you.
You bet. Last question? Last question? Sorry. Yes, sir. You're up.
No pressure.
No pressure. No pressure.
Morning, Jim. My question is, can you talk about a time you experienced failure? How did you overcome it, and how did you not let that define who you are?
I don't know that I can address failure the way you're asking the question.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because I was never by myself. I gave orders that turned out to be not good.
Okay.
I gave recommendations that turned out to be not good. But I never was in charge of an operation or an entity that totally failed. Not because I was such a great leader, but because all organizations have a structure to them. And if you let the structure work, and you're asking for input from those below you and giving your input to those above you, your probability of failure is significantly reduced. Having said that, now that I've got 11 years in corporate life, I believe there's much more opportunity to fail in corporate life than there is in military life. And that's because in military life, you've got thousands and thousands of leaders who've all been schooled many, many times, and they're all working together. In companies, especially new companies, you have the founder and maybe 1 or 2 other people, and they are growing this company, and they're doing things they've never done before in their lives, and they haven't been educated to do that. So they start stubbing their toe, and there's nobody around them to help, even tell them they're stubbing their toe. Okay? So the more of a startup company you have, the more likely you are to have failure, possibly because the product line just isn't going to make it in the marketplace, Or B, more likely, the product line's good, but the people who are trying to bring it to market don't recognize their own personal limitations and don't seek help from outside. That's a real danger. So if you're going into corporate life, the chances of failure, the smaller the company, the higher the chances of failure. And if you know that going in the door, you can help people by constantly looking around to see, okay, first, is my area good? And then who am I depending on for the success of the company, and how are they doing? So I'm outside my bandwidth a little bit here, okay? But if you know you're outside your bandwidth and you make a conscious decision it's for the good of the company, then I'm okay with that, okay? But I can't tell you how I dealt with failure because people who worked for me didn't let me fail. That answer the question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all very much for listening to me today. God bless you all.
Sir, thank you so much. And on behalf of the Naval Academy and the entire Leadership Conference, we have a gift for you.
Thank you. Thank you. If I may, before you, I envy each of you your opportunity to face the challenges you're going to face. I don't envy you the challenges. I envy you the opportunity to face the challenges and to lead a life at the end of which you can say to yourself, I made a difference, or I tried to make a difference. But to be able to say to yourself, you took care of your people and you did things the best way you knew.